Hello, and thanks for listening to the One More Thing podcast. I am your host, Tyeri Apia, and today we have a guest, a special guest. Her name is Jennifer Cabrera. She needs no introduction, really. Host of, or owner of, the Alachua Chronicle. How are you, Jennifer? How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Ty.
Great. As I just introduced you to the show, you are the owner, right, of the Alachua Chronicle.
Owner and editor, yes.
Owner and editor. It's amazing how you come up with stories every day. I'm like, how do you find something in newsworthy every day?
Well, I don't know that I do it every day, but I do most. I mean, I run a lot of press releases. Part of what I do is kind of aggregate news, but most of it is meetings, the city and county commission meetings. And so if they wouldn't have so many meetings, I wouldn't have so many stories. They meet so often, but also I could actually do more if they didn't have so many meetings, because there's always in my, piled up in my email a whole bunch of crime reports and all kinds of stuff that people send me that I run off public records requests on. And there's always something. There's always more that actually there's more I could do than what I do. It's just I'm one person, so I there it is.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get what you get.
Do the stuff you usually get, is it just usually like all Alachua related, or do you even get stuff from people out of county, asking you about something or talking about something, or is it usually just local?
Mostly local. I do I mean some of the sources that I get press releases from send me stuff that's not in the county. But so then I just pick the local ones. But a lot of what I do, I mean, my readership is local. So the people that reach out to me regarding Alachua Chronicle stuff, that's mostly local.
Understood. What made you want to start this a lot? And when? Well, actually, better question. When did you start?
So we started Alachua Chronicle. I say we because my husband helps me out. Um, we started about 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and the main I was at a period in my life where I had been working for my dad for most of my adult life, and my dad's business closed, and I was kind of in a place where I wasn't like, what am I going to do next with my life? And I was looking at various options. I was writing iPhone apps at the time, but not really enjoying it. And I found myself yelling at the newspaper every morning, specifically at the Gainesville Sun, because I felt like their headlines often were misleading.
Mm.
So if you actually read the story and got well into it, you would get a more balanced view. But the headlines are designed to, especially on a website, to get you to click on it. The headlines would call out maybe only one side of it, or maybe it would be sometimes what was in the headline wasn't even backed up in the story. So the Gainesville Sun is an example of what we have now for our corporate media. It's all owned by huge companies. Gainesville Sun is owned by Gannett, which is part of USA Today is part of Gannett. It's just a huge conglomerate that owns many, many newspapers.
Really?
And yeah, and almost every local newspaper is part of one of these conglomerates. There's a number of them. And so they work together to push a narrative, which is the same narrative you see on the network news and on cable news. And they're kind of telling you what it is you should care about right now. So, for example, after George Floyd, we went into a national conversation about policing and Black Lives Matter and all of that. And that's all that basically the media is saying, this is what's important right now. Black men get killed by policemen not that often, but it happens on a relatively regular basis, as do white men getting killed by policemen, and everything else. It's just part of what happens is in a normal day, but only certain events rise to become part of a national conversation, and those are carefully selected to when they fit a narrative. And the narrative was that policing is racist, that America is racist, whatever. So that was that narrative. Right now we're in a narrative about COVID, that we should all panic, that more masks are the only answer because the vaccines aren't quite working the way they thought they were, but still we should all go get vaccinated. And so there's if you pick up a newspaper right now, you're going to get hit with, go get a vaccine. COVID is the only important problem going on in our country right now. And, you will not see. And then if there's news stories that don't fit the narrative, you don't see them. And so, for example, on conservative networks, you might see a lot of stories right now about hundreds of thousands of people coming across the border every month. And that often they have COVID, but you won't see that probably. I don't read the Gainesville Sun cover to cover anymore, but probably you're not going to see that story in the Gainesville Sun because they don't really want you to be thinking about people coming across the border. So the whole newspaper industry is kind of and the whole media is pushing a narrative, and it's to make us all think that we have national conversations about things. Some incident gets blown up to a national story, and we have a national conversation about it, and that's how the media works. Well, I found myself yelling at it because they were leaving information out. They were not telling some sides of stories. They were slanting their coverage, and so I said, well, and specifically locally, I knew things that were counter to the implications in the stories. And I said, you know what, I can do a better job than this. And so I just started watching city and county meetings and writing up what I found interesting in the meeting. And so what I tell people is, I'm not saying that the Gainesville Sun is lying about what goes on in that meeting. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that what they find interesting is different from what I find interesting. And so I have readers who appreciate what I do. They do tend to be on the conservative side. And so because of that, I call attention to things that they will find interesting, which is often different from what the Gainesville Sun will draw attention to.
I didn't. You just taught me something new. I had no idea that the Gainesville Sun, which is a local newspaper, would be owned by corporate media or something. A company so big. I would have never thought that. So I'm surprised by that. I would think New York Times or Associated Press, CNN.
They used to be owned by the New York Times.
Oh, really?
That was 2 or 3 owners ago, yeah.
Really?
They've been just kind of sold around. The whole newspaper business is not, there's no good business model anymore for news, which is also a problem for me, by the way. But, fortunately, I'm kind of at a stage where I can go without a salary for a while. But it's there's no good business model. There's not that many places that want to advertise in newspapers anymore. The advertising revenue has dropped significantly. They used to make a lot of money from classified ads. Now you have Craigslist where you can do that for free. People want their news free. People don't want to pay for newspaper subscriptions. The whole news business is kind of in a little bit of a problem right now. There's not a good business model. So what you get is just these companies kind of buying up the local newspapers and trying to make a go of it with just enough. If you have 100 newspapers, then maybe you can bring enough money to and then you consolidate. So if you go to any Gannett newspaper, all of their websites look the same. It's all managed out of a central location. So you centralize the customer service. So you get some economies of scale by doing that.
So what was the, I guess I have to ask, what was the situation where you're like, you know what? This is the last straw. I'm making my own newspaper right now. What was the was there something that you can pinpoint? You saw this article or something and you're like, you know what? This is it. I'm done.
I don't remember. I do remember that it was a frequency thing. It was a kind of maybe the 9th or 10th time that I found myself literally just kind of yelling at the newspaper that I thought. Or maybe calling out to Len, can you believe what this says? That I said I could do this. And the other thing is that I've always been a really, really curious person. That when I see something driving down the road and something just looks different, and I think, wow, I'd like to know what's going on with that. And so part of what I'm loving about being in the news is that I can ask those questions and people answer them.
Wow, you can actually investigate,
yes.
Unlike some of the media.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's empowering, I think.
It is. And, of course, I had to learn a lot about public records requests, and I had to learn a lot about where certain information is kept and how to get on lists. And there's a lot to learn. Certainly, I've learned a lot about how local government works just by paying attention to it. So that's certainly useful.
Yeah. What if, I don't know if you know offhand, but what do you, and it's been 2 years now, is there something that was, I guess, top of the line, like most newsworthy to you? Like the biggest experience since you've been doing Alachua Chronicle?
So my biggest story was probably, it's kind of a weird one. Um, I still think I'd have to go check, but I still think the story that got the most views was when a dental student at UF
Mm-hmm.
um, disclosed to his fellow dental students or whatever that he had COVID, and that this is very early on, and that the university had said, no, keep working. And so he kept treating patients after having COVID, and he was just kind of like letting his fellow students know, because he wanted them to know that he had COVID and that he might have exposed them, and that the university wasn't doing anything. And so somebody sent me the email that he had sent to his fellow students. They're like, hey, my daughter got this. And and I published what happened. And I mean, it went absolutely nuts. And the funny thing was that a whole lot of the kind of the retweets on it was from FSU fans who were just who were saying, "Oh, look, how bad the Gators are, that they do this."
They just ate it all. They just ate it up, huh?
It was so funny, because it was really the reason it went crazy was because the FSU part of the state really picked up the story just to hammer on UF. So that was kind of funny.
Wow, that's amazing.
But you just never know when you're going to get some piece of information that maybe somebody else doesn't have yet.
So like somebody somebody contact you from UF?
Yeah.
And, what?
No, not from UF. Somebody that was like knew somebody that was at the dental school and for it. It's like I get a lot of, and that happens quite a bit. I get people saying, hey, I got this email from whatever city, county,
Mm-hmm.
hospital, whatever company in town, and don't use my name, but this is going on. People call me from GPD, people call me from the sheriff's office. People let me know stuff is going on. And so, and that's, of course, all newspapers function that way. And part of being a viable newspaper is having kind of that network of people who will send you tips. And clearly, TV20 and Gainesville Sun have a better network than I do, but mine's getting better. Mm-hmm. But usually the way the news cycle works in this town is, even if I get something first, it just gets picked up by somebody else, usually maybe TV20, and then they're the ones that get all the views on it.
Yeah. But I think
they have a bigger audience.
Yeah. But I think you're a breath of fresh air, really, because, somebody might be wanting to tell the truth about something, and they may not feel like they can if they know what you just told me, that the Gainesville Sun is controlled by big media. I'd feel more comfortable going to you, because you may be more interested in running the story as opposed to Gainesville Sun,
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to, like I said, I don't always have time to do everything that comes to me, but and what I tell people is, I will never divulge your identity, but what I normally do is, if you send me a tip, that normally just lets me make a public records request to get the information that you're telling me about. So I don't even, most of the time, don't even have to use whatever's sent to me by people. It just tells me what to go ask for. Like, somebody will say, hey, you should go ask for, there's this report that the city has put out, and, go ask for it, or, something like that. And then you find out that whatever it is, sometimes it's newsworthy and sometimes it's not.
Were you always a writer? Was that always your thing, or?
No.
Oh.
I've always been a grammar Nazi. My husband says I'm a grammar Nazi, but.
Your husband's a grammar Nazi?
No, he says I am.
Oh, he says you are. Oh, okay. Well, then that's perfect. That's perfect for the job that you're doing, huh?
Yeah. So I mean, technically, the technical parts of writing, I've always been pretty good at, but I've never been super interested in writing, and I'm still not. It's not the writing I like. But the writing helps me construct the story. Like as I write, I realize I have to make it make sense to the reader,
Yeah.
and that makes me ask the right questions to say, okay, what bridge is missing between this information and this information that I need to fill in. And so for example, if I start with an arrest report, I don't give it to you verbatim, but I'm going to try to tell the story of what happened in that incident. And so I'm kind of looking at all the different pieces, trying to make it all flow so that it makes sense to the reader.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you've done a lot of COVID articles as well when this was first going on, or the quote unquote pandemic started. You were doing a lot of COVID articles too, like looking at the data and finding if the data was accurate, right?
Well, right at the beginning, I decided that my readers needed a trustworthy source of COVID data, and specifically, what I tried to do was put it in context. So, what I saw other media outlets doing is they would pick whatever the biggest number was. So, if it was like there were a bunch of cases on that day, cases would be in the headline. If there were a bunch of deaths on that day, deaths would be the headline. But it would just scream out 173 deaths today or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I would say, today, and I would just lay it out. Today there were X cases, X, deaths, whatever it was, and then I would put it on a chart so you could every single day, so you could see how it compared to yesterday and a week ago and a month ago, whatever, so that you can see where is this number? Is this number higher than it's been? Maybe it seems like a big number, but it's actually lower than it's been. So unless you see the whole curve, you don't really, the numbers themselves are meaningless. None of us have any comprehension of what does it mean to have 80 cases of COVID in a town of 272,000 people, right? We don't have any comprehension of what does that mean for our risk. And we still don't, but at least if I say, we've had an average of, if you look at the curve, it varies from 50 a day to 200 a day, and we're right now at 120, then you're like, oh, okay, we're not in the highest, we're not in the lowest, but you get a feel for how it's gone. One story I tell is that very early on, we were having about, I don't know, 4 or 5 cases a day. This was super early on, and then all of a sudden one day, the state, reported to the county or whatever that we had 80 cases or something like that. And it just went out. And I called up the county spokesman, Mark Sexton, and I said, hey, this doesn't seem right to me. I don't see why it would go from, a nice steady low rate to just all of a sudden this very high number. And so I said, I'm not going to report it until it's verified. He's like, well, we're county health department's verifying it now. We'll let you know. And sure enough, they came back, and then it had just been a data entry mistake. And somebody had hit Alachua, since we're the first county in the list. Somebody just hit Alachua for a bunch of cases that weren't ours. So it's this kind of this ability to look at data in context and say, does that make sense? What's going on here? And so I've done a lot of that. And another example of that I didn't report on, because I don't report on VAERS, the vaccine adverse event reporting system. So last week it went from 6,000 deaths to 12,000 deaths for the vaccine. And a lot of people just went crazy with this. Like, oh my goodness, we got 6,000 deaths in 1 week, and we'd only had 6,000 deaths at that point. So, my internal data, thing said, that's probably not right. Sure enough, they reversed it later the day. It was an error. And so you always have to look at data in context. So that's what I tried to do for my readers. And toward the end, I got actually more negative feedback than positive. People going, just let it go. We're done with COVID. We don't want to hear about it anymore. Because I did this every single day for 15 months. I did not take a day off, except for there were 2 or 3 days that the state didn't report. So if there was no state report, like on Christmas, I didn't report either. But if there was a state report, I reported. And then and then what I did on Twitter was I reported for each day. I found out that, let's say 100 deaths are reported today. Well, what I found out was because I found a page at the Department of Health that showed deaths by day, and we can track changes from one day to another. And so what I found out is that there were 100 reported today. A lot of media outlets were like 100 deaths yesterday, but that's not how it works. There might have been 5 yesterday and maybe 12 the day before that, and then 8 the day before that, and 7, and then it keeps going back. And then by the time the last good report I got on this in June, we were having deaths reported back to the previous July. So sometimes 50% of them would be months old, and but the media always runs with it. So I got a big following on Twitter by reporting this data every day, and I was one of only maybe 2 people that reported, and the other one was producing the charts for me. So it was kind of a little niche that I established on Twitter and built a pretty good following. And that stuff was in my Alachua Chronicle articles, but I didn't make a big deal out of it. It was just part of my normal daily article.
So I don't want to misinterpret you here. Are you saying that when people were reporting, when people were, or the news was reporting deaths, if say 7 people were died on Tuesday, and then 3 more people died, right? But they would say 10 people died on Wednesday?
No, they would say 100 people died. Like every day, a report would come out and it'd say, new deaths since yesterday. And the way the report said is these are new deaths reported since yesterday. Okay, but what it was is they didn't happen yesterday. They just learned about them yesterday. They might have happened months ago, because it turns out there's huge delays in this.
Oh, okay. I'm tracking what you're saying. Okay. Wow, that's amazing. Wow.
So even right now, so today, the weekly report came out from the Department of Health on COVID, and it said that since last Friday, they learned about 409 COVID deaths. But according to this report, only 108 of them happened in the last week. So you have to be careful with all of these numbers. They don't actually mean anything, because the reporting is so erratic that we don't know when the deaths happened. I mean, I was able to find out, but in general, like right now, I don't have any way of finding out.
Yeah. And the truth is, many people aren't going to do what you're doing, Jen, right? We're just going to look at the numbers and say, oh my God, everybody's dying.
No, yes. And most people weren't interested in looking at it, but criticized me for looking at it, because by putting them in context and going, hey, we actually don't know how many people died yesterday, because all of these people died over the past few months on different days, that I was minimizing COVID, and that I was going to kill people by minimizing COVID. That was, I get a lot of that.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, I'm sure you do. It's always you're a killer if you're not. Are you vaccinated, by the way?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Oh, okay. Well, you ain't got to answer it. Well, I'll tell you, I'm not vaccinated, so. But I guess I'm a killer too, I guess.
Yeah, I know. People need to make their own decisions, and that's I tell you, it's a super tricky question right now.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, my personal opinion is that they're probably helpful for people who are at risk. Mm-hmm. And that's, I don't think we've been totally clear about who's at risk, but that if you're not at risk, we're learning more about, they don't protect you from infection, they don't keep you from spreading it, and there are risks. So
you have to decide for yourself.
You have to decide for yourself, and this push to mandate it, I think, is very wrong. I do want to say, since we're having a brief sideline into vaccines, locally, I know more people with COVID right now than I ever have. And so, clearly there's a lot going on here. We have very high cases. We are very near, I think, the peak. I think we're within a week of peaking and then, turning to go back down, which doesn't mean there's not going to be it's just going to be on our way down. There will still be a lot of spread on the way down, but at least we will have peaked, and it's not going to keep getting worse. But there's a clear pattern, and also doctors are talking to me that they're seeing people, not necessarily young, but middle-aged, with BMIs over 35 or so, who are getting very, very sick, that's who's in the ICU. It's
Really?
unvaccinated people with BMI over 35. And the younger people are going to have even higher BMIs in ICUs. And so I don't think we've messaged particularly carefully about the risk of being obese with COVID. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm young, I don't need the vaccine, where you may want to consider it if you have a high BMI. And because that is who's in the ICUs right now. And
Really?
it's not the older people.
Wow, really?
It's not. I mean, there are some, but right now it's a lot of unvaccinated. They call them young, but I mean, mostly they're in their probably 40s and 50s, and they're very, very heavy. And but the thing is, the other thing I know, I've seen 2 studies that you actually become more susceptible to catching COVID in the first 2 weeks after the first shot. So I'm not sure it's good advice to tell people to go get vaccinated right now when our spread is the highest. But if you're heavy, you may want to consider getting vaccinated. Once this wave comes down for Florida, which should be in the next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah. Or consider exercising.
Well,
Right?
yes, obviously, and those
I think
and
that's
exercising and changing your diet can have quick effects in like your blood chemistry and stuff. But at the same time, that's a long-term project.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how quickly that protects you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I don't, personally, I don't care if, I think like as you said, everybody has a choice and everybody should decide what risk they want to take. What, if they want to do it, if they don't want to do it. Some people say the vaccine has come out too fast and they don't necessarily have trust in it. Even conservatives, if they say, even conservatives don't care that Trump, spearheaded this vaccine. They're like, I'm not taking it. And even some people on a more liberal side say, well, it came from Trump, I'm not going to take it. So
yeah, it's to me, it's wrong. I wish it had not been politicized this way, and there should never have been such a strong push for everybody to get it, and all of these, vaccine passports, and all of this. Like they're talking in New York City, they're talking about having to have a vaccine card to get in certain restaurants and bars, and all of this is it's really pushing people in political directions that I don't think are helpful. But this should have been evaluated on a purely risk to benefit basis.
Yep.
With everybody looking at the data, who's at risk of COVID, who's at risk from the vaccine, does this make sense for this individual? And instead you have all of the doctors in this kind of massive group thing saying everybody should get it. There's literally almost nobody where this is not recommended for if you're over 12. And instead, remember that football programs almost shut down last fall and went into these crazy protocols because of the risk of myocarditis from COVID. Remember that?
Yep.
Where what's his name? The Clemson quarterback. He probably lost out on a Heisman because he had to sit out one game because it was the last day of his myocarditis protocol. He was totally over COVID, but he hadn't had the myocarditis screening yet, and they wouldn't let him play. And it was like their biggest game against Notre Dame or something. And if he had won that game, he probably would have been a Heisman contender, but he wasn't even allowed to play. So if you remember all the insanity about myocarditis and football players last fall, and now we have a real myocarditis risk from the vaccine in young men, and instead they're going to mandate that they all take it. I mean, where's the sense in this? You should nobody should be mandating something that's this new and this uncertain. Everybody should have the option to take it. And that should have been where it stopped.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. I completely agree with you on that. And it is a shame how it's been so politicized. I remember just watching the debates, for example, and hearing Kamala arguing with Pence and saying, if it came from Trump, I'm not taking no vaccine.
Exactly.
And I'm like, why would you say that? Why would you say that? Because then it just makes it this. It's like every single issue has to be a left or right thing. It just has to be. Why can't it just be just a choice thing? Just be that. Hey man, I looked at the risk and I feel like it's for me, and we just keep it moving from there. But it is quite a shame because people are not going to look at the data. They're just going to attach to their political sides, and that's it. And then there it is. All right.
Exactly. And I suspect a lot of people listening to this are thinking, you guys should be talking about what's really going on here, because I get a lot of that. And of course, what's really going on is a certain element in our society, and this goes back to my talk about the media and narratives and all of this, that they're pushing an agenda that demands our compliance with the masks and the vaccines, and that's why we're seeing the insanity we're seeing right now, where the federal government, governments in general, local and federal and state, not here state, but other places, are saying at the same time, you can be vaccinated and you can get COVID and you can spread COVID, and therefore we must mandate vaccines. It's complete insanity, and the whole narrative is falling apart, but they're just pushing it harder.
That's scary, right? Because to be honest with you again, I was thinking when a vaccine came out, I might take the vaccine. I'm not, I don't know what the definition of an anti-vaxxer is nowadays, but I'm not anti-vaccine. And I was thinking about, maybe I will take the vaccine. But then when I saw how hard it was being pushed, it actually turned me away from it. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna hold off on that.
Exactly.
That's kind of how it made me feel. It made me feel more fearful. Like, you know what? I'm not gonna take it now. I'm really not gonna take it.
Yes, they're destroying trust in public health, and I honestly don't even know whether they're doing it deliberately or not. It's hard to tell at this point.
Yeah, it just seems like a complete circle, because from the mainstream media that I'm seeing, it's two narratives going at the same time. Like, it's safe, you need to take it, you need to do it right now. There's a pandemic among the unvaccinated. And then, at the same time, it's like, well, the vaccinated people are also still spreading COVID. And maybe it's not effective against the Delta variant. So I just feel like it's a tornado of narratives. I'm like, I feel lost.
The safe and effective narrative is the silliest. I call it propaganda, because it is, because there's no nuance there. When they say you need to take the vaccine, it's safe and effective, what do people hear? It's completely safe, completely. There's no harm, no possible harms, and it's completely effective. And so what is the truth? The truth is that some people have died after taking this vaccine. Other people have been hospitalized. We have young people with myocarditis. We have, we have pregnancy loss. There's all these different things that are happening that they're trying to explain away, but they are associated with recent, vaccines. So are they 100% safe? No, obviously not. Is it an acceptable level of risk? We don't know, because they're not putting it in context, right? And then on the flip side, are they effective? Effective at what? Clearly, they're not effective at preventing infection. Are they effective at preventing severe disease? Probably, but we don't have good data. We don't have data at all. We have garbage, like CDC telling us that 99% of the deaths are in unvaccinated people. So we looked at that. You know what that does? That goes back to January. So when nobody was vaccinated, first of all, lots of deaths, COVID deaths in January. Nobody was fully vaccinated except for some hospital staff. So the old people weren't fully vaccinated in January. They weren't fully vaccinated until mid-February at the earliest. So they took all those deaths in January and unvaccinated people, and they count them with, basically all the deaths from January to now. And then they take out the ones that were fully vaccinated when they died, and they're like, 99% of people who died. Well, yes, when most of the deaths were in January and everybody was unvaccinated, that's what you get. But that's the kind of garbage they're giving us. It's what we're getting out of the CDC is incredible, because pure garbage. Every study they've given us for masks has been a garbage study. They're easily torn apart. They're just so easily torn apart. But oh no, masks work. No, they don't. Cloth masks have no ability to filter viruses. And the fact that we can't acknowledge, we can't even talk about it. You get kicked off of social media if you say that the vaccines aren't effective or masks aren't effective, because again, there's a narrative. And what I'm seeing personally at Alachua Chronicle is that there are fact checkers that work with the government, and they come on your site and they say, you have this information that we have a study over here that counters the study that you're quoting on your site. Everything we post links to studies. Everything we've done about masks has been backed up with links to every study we cite. So they say, well, your conclusion here is wrong because we have a study over here that says something different, and therefore we're going to call your article misinformation, and we're the fact checkers. And if it goes against the government's official line, it's misinformation, and the fact checkers brand you as a not trustworthy site. And this is going on everywhere. These fact checkers have gone crazy, and they're funded. You go look at who they're funded by. Talk about bigger narratives. Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, the usual suspects.
Can we include Soros in there?
Not specifically, but they, he works through a lot of sub agencies and nonprofits and stuff. So I mean, I used to think all this was conspiracy stuff, and then it starts happening to me.
Yeah.
With fact checking organizations coming after me and calling out the most ridiculous things. Saying you have misinformation on your site. And I'm like, but here's my study, and they give me theirs. I'm like, yours is garbage, and you could say mine's garbage, but that's fine. That's a discussion. Let's have a discussion. Let's take your study and let me tear it apart. You tear mine apart. Let's have a discussion. No, it's not. It's never. Let's have a discussion. It's I'm misinformation, and they have the right answer, and that's how it works.
That's amazing. No freedom, no respect for freedom of speech, right?
There's no freedom of speech anymore.
How many hours do you work?
Hard to know what you call working because, part of what I have to do as part of running a site is managing the Facebook page and managing the Twitter page and making sure I'm going through all my email. So I'm saying, so in terms of my actual writing, it tends to be, it's probably about 7 hours a day, but there's another 4 hours a day probably that I manage all the social media and make sure I've gotten through all my emails and responded to, what I'm saying, just managing the communications of running a media site. So I probably 11 hours a day on weekdays and 4 or 5 on weekends.
Wow.
I work a lot.
It's about 70 hours a week. About 70 hours a week.
Yeah, it's really kind of all I do.
Yeah. I'm not
Somebody
surprised.
asked me recently what I did for fun, and I don't have much anymore.
Do you use Grammarly at all? I'm just wondering.
So what?
Do you use Grammarly? Have you ever heard of that?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Then we know you're a grammar Nazi then. Because Grammarly is an app.
I do have the Associated Press style book that I use to look things up every now and then. But.
Oh, okay. How can we help you? How can we help your effort? Because, especially in this time, we want to see, well, at least I can only speak for myself, that I definitely want to see more free press, not controlled by big media, big corporations, which I didn't even know about the Gainesville Sun-News. You just told me that you really dropped the bomb on me today. So how could we help you? Is there any way we can help you, the viewers or listeners?
So we really do need funding, and the way I like to put this is it's not even for me, although I would like to be compensated for what I do, but also I'd love to be able to hire reporters to go to others. So, we're focusing right now, you and I, on the western part of the county, but I have no coverage of City of Alachua, City of High Springs, City of Newberry, City of Archer, right? I don't, because I can't. I can only do, Gainesville City Commission, Alachua County Commission. I do school board when I can, but that's it. I'm at my max. So I really, if I had more funding, I could hire freelance reporters to cover some of those other cities and report on their meetings, and then I'd have a much better representation in the western part of the county. So that's kind of my pitch right now is if you give me more money, I can do better coverage. So what I would ask is if you're an individual, go to our page. On every page in the right bar, there's a donation button. You can set up a recurring donation. So whatever you value a newspaper subscription as, whether that's $10 a month, $25 a month. See, Gainesville Sun is running $40-something a month right now. It's ridiculous. They have this ridiculous billing that is like they give you a number, but then they charge you that every 3 weeks. If you get the Gainesville Sun, go look at your bill. You'll see you're being charged every 3 weeks the amount that you thought was your monthly amount. Anyway,
Dropping a lot of bombshells today. $40 a month?
Something like that. So, if you, I would be so thrilled if people gave me $25 a month. Just set up a recurring donation so you don't have to think about it again. That would be extremely helpful. And if you have a business, look on our advertising tab and see if you want to run an ad. Ads are give you some value we get 10 to 12,000 views a day. That's a lot of people seeing your ads. So local, and they're all local. So we really encourage businesses to advertise with us.
Okay, good. Again, another question: can people submit articles?
People can submit letters to the editor.
Okay.
And you can also, if you want to do a bigger opinion piece, you can certainly submit that too. And you can send those to info at alachuachronicle.com.
Info.imfo?
Info, like information, info, at alachuachronicle.com.
Oh, at alachuachronicle.com.
I love letters to the editor, although it's pretty funny. The fact check site, that was two of the pieces that they complained about were letters to the editor. And I go look at the Gainesville Sun any day in their letters to the editor and ask me whether they fact check those. Just go look. Nobody fact checks letters to the editor. That's kind of the point. But anyway.
So if you weren't doing this, what do you think you would be doing?
I don't know, because I've always, my whole life, I've just kind of reinvented myself every so often, and I get interested in something new. And so I don't know what that next thing that would catch my interest. I mean, right as I do this, I'm getting more interested in policy. And so I might want to work in policy more, maybe for some sort of conservative policy organization, and where I would, do more in-depth I really enjoy the in-depth research and becoming super knowledgeable about a topic like I've become about COVID. But, I don't have time to do that, although I have with COVID, just kind of out of the necessity. But it's, when I'm just going day to day, here's, what's the news today? It's a different cycle. I don't really get to go in depth.
Roger that. Got you there. Wow. So I guess our one more thing would be we got to donate to Alachua Chronicle, and $25 would be the mark a month. Is that would be your one more thing before we close this show?
Well, sure. I like that. If you want to give less, but I would say 25 seems to be a reasonable now. Now, we were talking, though, you mentioned that you want to focus on activism. And so yes. I also want people to read Alachua Chronicle. You can put in your email address on, again, every page of the site has the box to subscribe. Put in your email address, and then every day you get an email with all of yesterday's stories. It's by far the easiest way to keep up with it. You can also like us on Facebook, and then we show up in your feed. But if you read all the articles about local meetings, you start understanding what's going on in local politics, and you understand that the far left has a stranglehold on our county. Every elected official, except for I think the state attorney, is not only a Democrat, but most of them are far left progressive Democrats. And we have to start taking some of that back. We have to at least get people on those boards to present alternative opinions at the very least,
Yes.
to speak for us, because we can only speak 3 minutes at a time in public comment. But if you get somebody elected, they can speak as much as they want. So pay attention to what's going on. Show up at meetings. All of them have phone-in capability right now for comments, so you don't have to go sit at City Hall all day. You can just call in on your phone and provide comments. Let them know what you think. At the very least, make them sit through all your comments. Just make them,
Yeah.
They shouldn't be able to pass stuff unanimously with no pushback. At least provide the pushback. At least let them know people are paying attention. And think about running for office. Show up at the school board. Send them emails. Pay attention. Don't think we can't do anything, because we can.
Absolutely. And it only takes one person. It really does.
Well, one person,
especially if they're organized.
As an example, Nathan Scott, all by himself, is a massive thorn in the heel or whatever of the Gainesville City Commission, because he's constant. He pays attention to everything. He asks questions. He does public records requests. He makes their lives miserable. He shows up at every meeting. He comments on every item. And there are other people that do that. And so you can all by yourself kind of slow them down, be a speed bump. But the more people that do it, the more effect we have.
Absolutely. So.
And you don't have to do everything. Pick one.
Mm-hmm.
Pick one board to pay attention to.
School board, or the Gainesville City Commission, or Newberry,
or your local municipality commission. People tell me there's stuff going on in City of Alachua. I just can't do one more thing. I would love to know more about what's going on at City of Alachua. I live in the City of Alachua. So, but I think that Gainesville affects all of us more, because that's where so many of the businesses are. So many of us do, our kids go to school in Gainesville, we work in Gainesville, we eat in Gainesville, we shop in Gainesville. So I feel like that's more important, but I'd love to be able to cover the others too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mrs. Jennifer Cabrera, for your one more thing. That's something we definitely need to do, is show up at these Gainesville City Commissions, Alachua City Commissions, and do our part in our activism. That one more thing. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jennifer. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me. You too.
Bye-bye.